So yes, thanks for joining. Today, talking about some of the challenges for change.org in these crazy times. I think we've all experienced, as emailers, we've all experienced real shocks to the email ecosystem, and we're learning how we should deal with them and what we can learn from them. And so what I'm going to talk about today is what change.org learned, but also what we had to unlearn to drive this sort of huge sustained user growth that we've been experiencing. It's been a very exciting time. I'm Alice Cornell. Apologies for those of you who saw my intro before, but I am Director of Email Deliverability at change.org and have been around in the email world for, well, over 17 years, and I do lose count. But I'm really super excited to be part of this Deliverability Summit. I miss my deliverability people. Really enjoyed Kate's session. Looking forward to hearing some more over the day. And for those of you that don't know about change.org, let me tell you a little bit about the organization. So we are the world's largest open platform for social change. We're staffed in 17 countries. And our mission is to empower people everywhere to make the change they want to see in the world. I think for a long time, the decisions that affect all of our everyday lives have been made by quite a small group of people behind closed doors. And our aim at change.org is to open those doors and raise the voice of ordinary people to be heard and to be part of those conversations. We feel it's really important. So we started the year with 300 million users across the world, but we now count 425 million, approximately. More on that later. And we send around 1 billion messages a month in support of those users. So it's a lot of users, it's a lot of mail. And of course, it's my job to make sure that all of those messages deliver to people's inboxes and don't get lost in the spam folder or blocked or any of the other numerous things that can happen between sending a mail and having it reach your end user's inbox. So in a UK context, 1 in 5 people have signed a change.org petition. And here in London, that percentage is even higher. So I'm hoping a fair few of you have used our platform in one way or another. If we were having a live auditorium here, I'd have you all raise your hands, but I'll just have to hope that you're with me in spirit on this. And so yes, we've got quite a deep penetration particularly within Europe. And people come to the site for all different kinds of reasons. So being an open platform means that we don't have our own political agenda, and our users come to us with varied politics, religions, values, but they all have a really important story to share that they feel passionately about, and a change that they want to make. So we have a team of campaigns coaches who help turn those user petitions into powerful campaigns. And here's a couple of examples, quite recent examples. First, a petition started by the wife of Karim Enera, a human rights activist, and this just helped release him and several other activists from jail where they'd been unjustly imprisoned in Egypt. So really pleased about that. There's a petition trending at the moment to have people with learning difficulties that are resident in care homes recognized as vulnerable and eligible to receive the COVID vaccine. Hugely important, especially if you know anyone in a care home. It's a scary time. And finally, a coordinated effort to prevent unjust deportations. And this recently saved 37 people that arrived here in this country as children. They're now adults, but they're being deported back to Jamaica. This is especially important during COVID, when people aren't even able to say goodbye to their kids in person. So these are really impactful stories. You may have seen them in the press. They have deep meaning for people. And there are so many different causes on change.org. And of course, our teams can't help everyone. But actually, most of the victories on our site win with less than 1,000 signatures. So we're creating tools to help people be successful, even without help from a campaigns team. And it's crucial to us that these tools are kept free and accessible. So that's a little bit about change. But whatever the cause, email is absolutely crucial to what we do, and it powers a lot of the mobilization behind the people power. So it drives site activity, it drives revenue. It's the main point of contact for most of our users will have with change.org. If they're hearing from us, it's mostly by email. People share via social media, etc. But if they're hearing from us, it's probably an email in their inbox. So how do we use email to create this kind of social change? Well, as I say, it's how we connect with both the supporters, the people that are signing petitions, and the people that are starting them. And it's how we enable those starters to connect with their signers, and so they can drive further action. I was going to say through mail bombing, but that sounds terrible. What I mean is sending a campaign of emails or tweets to a decision maker to help get the point across that there's a real swell of a strong feeling about that campaign. Or maybe they want to organize a petition delivery to number 10 or wherever, of course, in a socially distanced fashion at the moment. But our particular challenge is that being an open platform, I mean, one, we're dealing with personal stories that can evoke very emotional responses. And two, people are complicated and we can't assume anything. So just because you signed a petition about a local dog's home, for example, it doesn't necessarily mean that you want petitions about animals ongoing. We can't make that assumption, although it gives us a clue as to what you could be interested in. So we constantly need to try to understand more about what our users like, don't like, feel strongly about, and how then to match them with issues that they care about so they can get more deeply involved in those causes. And if we get our targeting wrong, we can make people understandably very angry. You know, if you're sending out a petition about Trump, is it for pro-Trump supporters or anti-Trump supporters? And we have both audiences on our site. So targeting is crucial. And with engagement, of course, being key to reaching inboxes, it's absolutely one of the most important challenges for us. But let me tell you a little bit about our email journey. We started way back when I started, 7.5 years ago. Email had been happening for a while before I got there. We were really using batch and blast. We were new, we were young, we were trying to be viral. We needed signatures on our petitions. We're saying, please sign this petition, thank you for signing. And I think that everybody has been in a batch and blast environment. And if you're a small organization with a small database, maybe that is still going to be working for you, and that's fine. But as we grew, we knew we had to get more sophisticated. We started targeting based more on interest areas, so different causes such as women's rights or animal rights, etc., to try and tailor the experience for our users a little bit better. But as I said before, we don't just want to limit people to those causes. We need to broaden our understanding of what they're interested in. You know, as we grew, it was less about being viral and getting signatures on petitions, and it was more about how can we keep our existing users engaged. I mean, if there's 1 in 5 people in the UK, I think it's 1 in 4 in Spain are change.org petition signers. So it's more about how do we serve our existing users better rather than concentrating on getting more signatures from more users. And as time has passed, we've got better at trying to tailor that experience. So we're now starting to use geolocation. Of course, that's really impactful. People often really care about the issues that are local to them and are impacting their local area, but also on engagement. So people that are taking more action on the site are often ready to receive more email. They're keener to sign more petitions. Whereas people that are less engaged don't want to receive so much mail. And so starting to use a combination of content themes, geolocation and engagement levels has been really good for us. And I'll talk about that in a moment. But we're always heading towards our Shangri-La of more automated matching. And the reason for that is, you know, once upon a time, we had this, what we thought was a hugely audacious goal of having 1 billion users. You know, it was a very San Francisco thing. Let's have this huge goal. But now we're at 425 million. Actually, that doesn't seem so unachievable, although we're not even halfway there, but it seems more like it's a possibility. And we're not going to be able to serve those users by continuing to curate mail in the way that we do now. We're going to have to get much cleverer at it. And I would say we're around here at the moment. We're putting more emphasis on trying to do data discovery as to how we can learn more about our users and target them better. So using quite complex queries to match people with causes that they feel passionate about. But it's very hard for an algorithm to read sentiment and to understand the complexities of people. So it's a really interesting challenge. We've got a team of people that are doing amazing work on that. So let's talk a little bit more about those engagement segments. We set quite strict benchmarks around what volume of mail is appropriate for each segment. So our power users get most. I mean, they're the people that are signing all the time. They're really keen to sign constantly. However, we still don't want to overmail and fatigue them. They're like our most engaged, supportive users. It's not like we want to punish them with email. We want to serve them what they want to receive and what they're interested in. And although we send less mail to those users that are less engaged, so our disengaged group or our casual group, we don't want to undermail them, because after all, if we don't send them anything, how can they engage with us? How can we learn more about them? And we also have quite strict sunset rules. That means that if we don't see any activity from a user, then we gracefully let them go. So actually undermailing could mean that we lose a proportion of our database unnecessarily. And that's something we really want to avoid, these hard-won users that have been active on the site. So when we're looking at the sort of large volumes that we're sending, engagement really impacts our inbox placement. So if we're sending to too many disengaged, then our mail looks like people are not interested in it. It's much more likely to go to the spam folder. You might be thinking, why sunset so aggressively? And that's a good question, because across the world, we have different levels of hygiene around data acquisition. I would love for it to be the absolute top all over the world, but that's not how it works at the moment. And of course, another essential key to inbox placement is being able to deliver volume at scale. So to protect our database from the impact of invalid users, spam traps, fraudulent addresses, sunsetting, letting a user go if they haven't been active, is like the final tool that we have to make sure that we don't keep mailing users that we shouldn't. And at the same time, we need to reach our disengaged users. So the cadence and content is really crucial. And that's not just for conversions, of course, which is super important, but also for email deliverability. So let's talk about how this works with our content themes. Take this petition on street harassment in the UK. So we're pretty sure it's going to perform strongly with all of our core and power users, because it's a strong, uncontentious ask. It's not political. I think everyone can get behind it. And we should definitely send it to all of our women's rights users, obviously. And these are young women of school and of university age. So it's quite likely to resonate strongly with our education tag as well. And so we pull all these things together, and that's how we would develop our targeting. And if something really is performing well across these kinds of segments, then maybe we'll broaden the audience for that particular petition. And this has been working pretty well for us, I have to say. In fact, segment-based delivery has meant we've sent less overall mail, but our opens and clicks have increased significantly. We reduced unsubscribes by 50%. Signature rate is a key metric for us. And, it's our conversion, as you might call it. And that increased by 30%. So really, we're pretty happy with that development. We're working on developing it even further, and also still moving towards improving automation, identifying and gathering data points that will be useful. Everything's good. And then, boom, COVID happens. And suddenly our site traffic tripled. And so we're spinning up servers like crazy. The site is creaking. Our infra team are, staying up all night. And it's because everybody was at home. They're at home all over the world starting petitions, because people felt really helpless in the face of this overwhelming pandemic and wanted to make change. And so they turned to change.org to do it. The sort of things that people were starting petitions on were things like here in the UK, free car parking for NHS workers, making sure that kids still got school meals, PPE for key workers, a knighthood for Tom Moore. These are the kinds of campaigns, but they were across the it's a really broad spectrum of petitions being started. And for a few weeks, we had, I think, a minimum of 120,000 users on our site. That was every minute of the day, 24 hours a day, and it was crazy. We went from something like an average of 200 petitions a week to, I think it was 200 petitions to 2,000. We moved from an average of 20,000 new users a week to 250,000. It was just, it really took us by surprise, that kind of exponential growth in site usage. So suddenly we had to really throw our rulebook right out of the window, because people wanted content. They wanted petitions. They wanted to take action. And they were coming to our site to do it. So as I say, we had to rapidly rethink those careful benchmarks that we'd developed and those ideas about over-mailing and under-mailing. And while the industry was saying, inboxes are flooded, all the businesses are going online, people are overwhelmed, we actually found there was a definite appetite for more mail. And in fact, we doubled our send rate for some segments. And we saw the results. Well, the results in our metrics. Our signature rate tripled. Our open rates increased from 14% to 38%. Our victories doubled. It's just, this is great. It's like, this is amazing. And of course, in our metrics, everything's now showing this great up and to the right graph, which we love to see. But all of our metrics are showing a huge spike. And so coming down off that high, we knew that we were going to have to start reining in that volume again to be more appropriate. But then George Floyd was murdered, and suddenly racial justice petitions were on fire across the world. And so we were spiking again. And the petition to bring, those police officers to justice had something like 20 million signatures worldwide. I mean, the largest petition previously was 5 million signatures. It was around the climate emergency. So we've suddenly got all these people coming to the site. Now, the George Floyd story is a completely different story, and it's actually one that prompted the organisation to have a total rethink and reset around how we operate. But where we're at right now is that we're still sending around 1 billion mails a month. Site usage hasn't gone back to pre-COVID levels, and we're really trying to find our new normal. We had to try and gauge at what point people only wanted to hear about the pandemic or racial justice, or when they were ready to think about other issues. And that's a real fine balance to tread. And I think probably other emailers experience the same thing. When people have only got an appetite for that thing, or maybe they're sick of hearing about the pandemic and they want to think about other things. So it was a real fine balance. And there are other challenges coming down from that kind of spike. So for example, we can't tell what behaviors have been masked by it. So maybe we've done something that might have negatively impacted engagement, but it's really hard to tell because of all those good metrics are hiding it. It's lost within that. But we've definitely learned some crucial lessons. So I'd say, firstly, to make sure that our teams have the ability and the confidence to be flexible and responsive. So not being bound by rules that we've created ourselves, but be able to respond in the moment to a rapidly changing landscape. It was absolutely essential. And part of that was the importance of empathetic mailing. So being in touch with what users want and responding to that. And so here, the difference between noise and value is so important. So knowing when to stop, knowing when an email is bringing value to a user or when it's just becoming part of the clutter of the inbox. And so, for example, after the George Floyd petition, people across the world were really hungry for other actions to take. People felt so passionately about it, of course. And in the US, we started sending a daily action mail to people with further campaigns that they might be interested in. But that's a daily mail, and that's a big send for us in the States. We had to be really careful not to fatigue people and to be perceptive as to when to stop, when is the right balance. So you definitely cannot set it and forget it for this type of mail. You've got to be constantly vigilant as to when that tipping point is for people where actually it's not bringing them value anymore and they're no longer engaging with it. So that sensitivity to how people are feeling in the moment. And of course, you probably want to know how we're listening to our users. And, I have to say the usual email suspects of we're certainly using. So opens and clicks and conversions, which is signature rate for us, for the positive engagement. And then complaints and unsubscribes for negative engagement. I mean, I say negative, but actually, as a deliverability person, I like unsubscribes. I know, but I do. And I like them because unsubscribes are a really important indicator that you're getting something wrong. And I'm going to take them over spam complaints, which would damage your sender reputation any day. And it's actually much, much worse if unsubscribes stop, because if people can't even be bothered to unsubscribe, they've probably stopped seeing your mail at all. It's either in the spam folder or it's just lost in inbox clutter, and then you're really in trouble. I mean, I really feel that whenever you find a deliverability issue, it's a great indicator that there's something that you can improve in your email program. You just need to go and find out what that is. So we were looking at positive engagement and negative engagement. We were also thinking about direct user feedback. So we have a I don't like this content a button in our mails. We also sometimes use happiness ratings. So how relevant is this mail to you in a footer at the bottom? And CSAT surveys. So surveying our users, how relevant is this? How, do we send you email at the right cadence? All of those questions. But of course, it's really worth remembering with direct user feedback that it's often from your most engaged users. They're the people that engage with the feedback, or possibly from really unhappy or angry users. And that, we don't always get our targeting right. And some of the replies that we get to our mails can be pretty vitriolic. But we still find that kind of direct user feedback really useful. So there's still, that's what we were using that in the moment, but there's still so much to learn as we start to do analysis on how users that joined us through these events behaved. So how can we continue to serve them? And what it means for our re-engagement and reimagining the user journey on our site. And also, how can we be ready for the next big thing? And I'm not tempting fate here because it is still 2020. But who knew that last year statues would be a contentious issue and that we would be trawling our site to check for violations of our terms of service based on statues? It's just, you just don't know what is going to happen. So trying to be prepared is the way forward. So what sort of questions have we been asking ourselves? We've been looking at the movement of the signers of these large petitions through our site. How many of them were new signers? How many were repeat? Who are those users? How many were mailable previously? And then what happened to them next? What actions did they go on to take? Which segments did they end up in? How many of them just churned really, really quickly? And I think the most important question is, what are the opportunities for us to re-engage with those users? And taking into account that we also have to accept that with these spiky petitions, as we'd call them, some signers will only ever come to the site to sign that petition. They've seen it on the news, their friends are all signing it. They just want to take action for that one petition. And we have to accept that and honor that. We can try to re-engage them and broaden their interest in change.org, but we do have to let a proportion of people go gracefully. So really, in a nutshell, what we're thinking about is, when a big thing happens, think, how is it going to affect my program? No one wants to be the person that's delivering tone-deaf triggered messages in the middle of a natural disaster or a pandemic. We found that, you know, for that we need to listen to our users, need to make sure we've got the metrics that help us listen to our users, and to be flexible, not to be rigidly, we have to stick to these rules because they've always worked for us previously. And it also helps to have a great infra team that work well under pressure and don't mind staying up all night. But I think the key thing was taking a user-centric viewpoint, thinking about the different people coming to the site and how we can serve them best. Now, in practical terms, excuse me, we did see some deliverability issues as we, you know, our volume increased really quite significantly, but nothing too major, thank goodness. But what we did we were lucky in that we recently introduced a new segment to our segmentation, which we've rather dramatically called high-risk users. But they are the least engaged of our disengaged users. And excluding those users from some of our wider sends has been really helpful for our deliverability. So they're the people most likely not to engage at all, or to be addresses that we don't want to have on our database. And the second thing was that we're constantly trying to improve our anti-abuse measures. So bad actors are constantly trying to add fake signatures to petitions. I mean, it's whether that is to game the system, or it's to discredit change and to say all these are fake and none of these users are real. We also come under DDoS attacks by people that don't agree with some of the content or the political views on our site. We operate in very contentious countries where people feel very passionately. And so increasing that security, and I'll give you an example. So by forcing addresses with unknown domains, for example, forcing those addresses to double opt-in has meant that we've significantly decreased our spam traps from thousands a day to less than 100, which for a sender of our volume, I'm particularly proud of. But so taking these practical actions has also been really essential to make sure we keep up our good deliverability, being aware of those, keeping an eye on those metrics, and being aware that when big things happen, sometimes you have to take big actions to mitigate any impact. Finally, you know, the final thing that we really learned was look after your team, because these are really emotional times, and everyone's under a huge amount of pressure. Change was super aware at how anxious everyone is over COVID, suddenly having to work from home, also how emotionally charged the campaigning around racial justice was and continues to be. And we've worked really hard at looking after our staff, and especially the campaigners on the front line. So whether it's support for working from home, it's self-care, summer Fridays to give everyone some downtime and a chance to recharge. I mean, in these times, I think it's more important than ever to be looking after each other. So I think on that note, I will take a deep breath. I feel like I've spoken a lot. Thanks so much for staying with me. And I would love to take any questions that you might have. I hope it's been useful.
Of course, it's been useful, immensely useful, Alice. Loads of people watching. Can you hear me okay? Oh, you've gone. Alice? Alice is gone. Alice doesn't want to answer any questions. No, she doesn't. I'm sure she'll be back in a moment. There we go. Hey,
I seem to drop out, but now I'm back.
No worries.
Do you hear me okay? Okay, good.
Yes, we do. You're perfect. And we've really got a few questions lined up. And let me just see the other screen. And I know Nick Crawford had one. Has there been any sense of reader fatigue? So, your recipient fatigue with engagement or deliverability dipping in the last few months? Or is the changes in the way people are working, I mean, that's not affecting you so much?
There has been signs of fatigue. And as I say, it's a real balance of trying to understand what content is going to work with who. That's really different country to country. So folks in the States reacting very differently to people in the UK, for example. And so we've had to really, I have to say that having the high risk segment where we're cutting out a lot of our disengaged users, most disengaged users, has really helped with those deliverability issues. But country teams having to choose the content that they think is going to be most useful or most people are going to respond to most country to country has been really essential. So especially for our team in the US who've been dealing with the response to the racial justice campaigns, which have been very heated in the political situation in the States, testing out that content and seeing what will work and what won't has been essential. Like I think our deliverability would have been much worse if teams hadn't been so conscientious about looking at trying to really understand what people are ready for and what people want. So yes, we've definitely had it. We're working on it.
A question from me. I've got other questions from the delegates. But do you do much stuff that, I mean, yes, the Black Lives Matter stuff, all of those things, they're politically charged. But is there anything, very clearly left or right type politics? Do those people come onto the platform and use the platform?
They do, and it's really different around the world. So, for example, in Brazil and in India, the majority of the people using the platforms are much more conservative in their outlook than they are in the UK or the States, for example. And we really try to actively encourage people from the whole political spectrum to use the site. We want to be seen as an open platform. In fact, it's actually crucial that we operate as an open platform in some countries where we would probably be taken down if we were seen to be just a liberal site. So it's really important for us to have the voice, everybody's voice reflected on the platform. And sometimes we even have opposing petitions that we can send out at the same time. So we're not supporting one or the other. So we can send both, and people can choose which one they support. But yes, there are definitely areas of, we have pockets of users that are happier with some content and happier with others.
And so that's a manual thing. There's no AI in the background going, oh, okay, this campaign and this campaign are related, and putting them together.
More and more, we're starting to introduce AI, and we need to introduce it a lot more. And that is my dream for our platform, because as I said, we can't continue to curate it manually in that way. But it's so hard for an algorithm to understand the sentiment. And a lot of the email tools, the really cool email tools that people are using in our industry, find it really hard to cope with the sentiment behind a lot of our petitions. They can't tell whether people are for or against. And so that's a real challenge. And also as I say, we don't want to keep people pigeonholed, and we want to try and broaden their horizon, and getting an algorithm to do that is a real challenge. I think that something like Spotify is probably the nearest thing that I can think to it, where music is such a personal choice. So I think we've probably got something to learn from platforms like that.
Yeah, sure. And I know that we've got more than just big retails and SaaS platforms and B2B people on here. We've also got a significant number of delegates that are doing social work, social justice work, or working in the the third sector, whether they're charities or NGOs or otherwise. I'm sure a couple of them would like to ask, even if they haven't, how does someone submitting a petition find their way on the radar of those curators? Is there anything they can do, or is it just things that happen behind the scenes and that's your secret sauce?
So that's a good question. So we do have teams of people supporting petitions, but we can only touch about 1% of the petitions in that way, because there's so many petitions being started all the time. And so we're always looking for petitions that are trending, that are starting to gather interest organically, because that shows that there's strong feeling about those petitions out there and that we should support them. So that's, it needs to have some groundswell, some organic groundswell for us to think this is a petition that we should support. But saying that, we're actually, part of the reset and the rethink that we're having within the organization is how can we help more people on a lower touch basis? So starting to have teams of people to support petition starters in either via text message or maybe via WhatsApp or via email, to support them in they're starting their petition journey and improving the quality of those petitions over a much broader scope, rather than concentrating on key what we'd call a breakout petition that's going to be a massive news story, because as I say, so many petitions win with less than 1,000 signatures. We want those people to be successful. We don't always want to have people be supported to make those petitions a success, and it's not the case. But we could do better, and we're trying.
Well, I love your work. Before you rush off, I know you've got lots to do. Andrew Donovan posed a question. He said the open rates went from 14% to 38%, which, if anyone else told me that other than Alice, I'd be asking for the proof and give me the logins. But yeah, I know you've no reason to inflate those figures. So what else changed, if anything, is Andrew asking? Was there some smart subject lines that were being written, or is it just pure subscriber appetite?
I would like to think that it's our smart subject lines. We do test our subject lines as thoroughly as we can in the short amount of time and resource that we have. But really, it was really mainly user appetite. And I wish that I could say that open rates have stayed as high as that, but they have not. And they sort of average, on the whole, they're averaging around 20%. I don't mind sharing that with you all. I would like to see them around 25%. We're constantly trying to grow that, but as everybody knows here, that's a challenge. And when you have a large, broad user base, it's even more of a challenge. But yeah, it was mainly user appetite, because I I hate to say this, but people were really frustrated. They were at home, they were online, and so they turned to sites like ours. I don't want to say it's because people were bored. I want to say it's because people felt really strongly in that moment that they wanted to take action, and so we were there to hopefully to help them do that.
I mean, I think it was a cocktail of things, that there was a lot of real strong sentiment from people, and then there was also the lockdowns that were happening. So I think maybe a horrible situation, but a magic time for you in terms of seeing recipient engagement and stuff. I mean, I love the work that change.org does, and there's so many friends and family that have had projects that got the visibility that they needed because of the work that you guys do.
I love to hear that.
Politics or otherwise, but yeah, no, I mean, I know without change.org, my brother who runs a big social organization out in Croydon, it wouldn't have happened. He wouldn't have been able to gain the traction and stuff without having something as simple as change.org to use. And it goes so far as that they're only a small team, but when they hear Alice is speaking, they're like, "Oh, can I come to the Deliverability Summit?"
Oh,
their email marketing extends as far as using MailChimp, I think. But yeah, they're always keen to hear from you, and thank you so much for taking time out. I know you guys are really busy, big time of year for you, and yeah, I can't thank you enough, Alice.
My absolute pleasure, and thank you for that feedback. That's so lovely to hear. Thanks to everyone for sticking with me. I'm looking forward to the rest of the day. I shall be listening in the background. It's going to be great. Thanks, Andrew.